It's just industry standard to kind of often use these algorithmic riddles that don't actually apply to what you do end up doing on the job. Very often on the job, I would have multiple links of Stack Overflow open. I'd this was back in the day of pre-remote, not remote jobs, but I would look over my shoulder and ask someone of hey, can we talk through this problem that I'm thinking through? I would ask and talk others. I would look things up and try as I was building things. But in an interview setting, all of that was stripped away. And it was hey, can you master this algorithm and write it on the whiteboard perfectly? My name is Sargun, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Whiteboard.
This is Code Story, a podcast bringing you interviews with tech visionaries.
Spent 6 months moonlighting.
There's nothing at the back end.
Who share what it takes to change an industry.
I don't exactly know what to do next.
It took many goes to get right.
Who built the teams that have their back.
The company is its people.
The teams help each other achieve. I was proud of our team.
Keeping scalability top of mind.
All that infrastructure was
Yes, we've been fighting it as we grow.
Total waste of time. The stories you don't read in the headlines.
It's not an easy thing to achieve, mind
Took it off the shelf and dusted it off and tried it again.
To ride the ups and downs of the startup life.
You need to really want it.
It's not just about technology.
All this and more on Code Story. I'm your host, Noah Labhart, and today how Sargun is leading her team through a major redesign. Not coding itself, but the coding interview. This episode is supported by Terso. Terso is the open-source edge database from the creators of libSQL. Do you put your edge computing close to your users? You should put your data there too. Terso makes this easy utilizing the developer experience of SQLite. Access a free starter plan at terso.tech/codestory. Terso, welcome to the data edge. This episode is brought to you by our friends at MemberStack. MemberStack is the fastest way for you to launch a beautiful Webflow MVP with robust authentication and smooth payments integration. Join companies like Slack and American Airlines in serving millions of members every single day. Get started for free by visiting memberstack.com/codestory. Before Sargun got into tech, she was anti-wanting to be in tech. Her dad was an engineer, and she thought the work he did was super boring. She pursued journalism, marine biology, and found herself changing interest a lot as she got bored. Now, she came over to the dark side and jokes that she is no longer interesting because she is so immersed in what she does in tech. But outside of tech, she loves to travel, build community, and hosting people. This boils down to loving bringing people together through multiple means. And finally, she jokes that she is a mediocre Instagram poet, enjoying writing semi-deep posts on the platform. When Sargun was applying at Google, she went through their normal engineering interview process, i.e. 5 whiteboard sessions back-to-back. After getting hired at Google, she struggled with the industry standard for interview questions via algorithmic riddles that didn't mirror the actual job. These types of interviews weren't only not fair, but left many great candidates out in the cold. This is the creation story of Whiteboard.
Whiteboard's a technical interview platform that replaces pre-on-site technical interviews with a project-based alternative. It effectively mirrors what engineers do on the job through a interview work sample that you create. So it helps companies evaluate a lot more efficiently and effectively. And it's completely anonymized, so it helps reduce bias in the process as well. When I was applying to Google, I was graduating from college at that point and studying for my interviews. So like it was like a full-time class, 4-unit class I was studying for effectively. In that preparation, I'd studied cover to cover, cracking the coding interview. I'd done all these practice interviews. Ultimately, Google was a long shot for me. I didn't entirely have that confidence that I would get in. I failed my on-site round at Google. There were 5 on-sites back to back. I stood in front of a whiteboard and had to code algorithms. And one of those questions I just forgot to memorize. I forgot to practice the night before, and I completely shot it. And to some amount of luck, to some amount of timing, even after getting rejected a couple months later, got the opportunity to interview again at Google and ended up joining Google, doing really well, getting promoted and being on a product team or like a product engineering team on the Google Photos side, which is where I learned an incredible amount of how to build a scrappy product, I would say, and also like keep users and value up front, which a lot of the practices I brought into building Whiteboard. At that time, a couple of years in, having gone through this interview experience and now being a hiring manager at Google and seeing, these incredibly smart, talented individuals getting stuck on these interview questions that we had and that were used pervasively across the industry. It's just industry standard to kind of often use these algorithmic riddles that don't actually apply to what you end up doing on the job. Very often on the job, I would have multiple links of Stack Overflow open. I'd this was back in the day of pre-remote, not remote jobs, but I would look over my shoulder and ask someone of hey, can we talk through this problem that I'm thinking through? I would ask and talk others. I would look things up and try as I was building things. But in an interview setting, all of that was stripped away. And it was hey, can you master this algorithm and write it on the whiteboard perfectly? And that left a lot of candidates out of the process, particularly candidates who were walking in and had self-taught themselves or not been a part of this process before or didn't have family members or friends that were part of the industry, so they didn't prepare them for this. But that didn't mean they were any less smart or any less capable of being amazing engineers. And so that's really where the idea of Whiteboard cropped up of clearly something's missing here, something's broken here, and there must be a better way to interview candidates in a way that feels fair and it measures for the skills that we actually apply on the job. And so the word Whiteboard came from this play on the word whiteboard interviews and how do we get more bites out of an individual in a more effective way. And that in there was where Whiteboard was built.
Let's dive into the MVP. Tell me about that first product you built. How long did it take you to build, and what sort of tools did you use to bring it to life?
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the Whiteboard story and often feels a little surprising. We sold Whiteboard to our first customer, which was Lyft, without really having coded barely anything. So we were very, very scrappy when we went off to build our MVP to see if it would actually work. We had this idea of a very clear problem statement. Interviews don't measure for the skills that engineers practice on the job. So to build something that was more effective, we talked to a ton of engineers across industries, across levels, and asked them what they did day to day on their job. Lo and behold, they didn't say that they wrote code on a whiteboard all day. They actually said communication skills, trade-off analysis skills, systems reasoning skills, the ability to read and write through code. So we took that study, understood, and identified the top skills at that point from all of our research and started to develop on a Google Doc effectively an interview of what that might look like, how we might assess for those skills. And the initial version, interview that went out to candidates looked something like this. A company would send out an interview and we'd get a notification. We would manually then go into and send out an email to that candidate with a Google Doc attachment for our part one of our interview exercise and a zip file with the coding piece of the interview. And we'd tell them to time themselves and send us back their materials when they were completed. And we would roughly put a calendar timer for ourselves of this is when we should expect to receive the interview back. So it was so heavily manual, but at that point, we were starting to see what was working, what parts of the interviews were candidates getting stuck on, or what parts of the interview where we're getting really good signal. And the first 200 candidates went through a process very similar to that. And it worked. We were starting to see companies really respond to getting a really good signal out of the assessment materials that the candidates were sending out. From there, we started to get a lot of feedback of hey, it's really hard to set a timer by ourselves, or it's really annoying to, for us from a logistical perspective of manually having to send out these interview invites. So we started to lean on app scripts, which was our kind of godsend tool at the time. Very, very scrappy. Don't recommend it for scaling purposes. And we may have relied on it for a little too long as an MVP building tool. It was fantastic. We were able to automate so much of our initial product and build the bones of what our product looks like today and test it out using app scripts, using Google Docs, and any of the kind of tools and widgets that we can do to determine what the experience should look like for our customers. And that worked out really well.
Let's stick on the MVP a little bit longer. You know, with any MVP, you got to make decisions and trade-offs about how you make that MVP, right? About how you cut scope, how you approach it. Tell me about some of those decisions you had to make in a little more detail. Specifically, how did you cope with those decisions?
As an individual, I am a perfectionist, and especially at the initial stages of building Whiteboard, I was like, we need a website, we need it to look pretty, we need this to all feel unified. When you're strapped for time and you're building something just to understand it, pushing yourselves to just like get something out the door was a really new exercise for me. Some of the trade-offs, we wanted like, hey, we should have like an end-to-end platform. Who should grade the interviews? How should we run the assessment? And the initial thought exercise was we would build the content of the interview, we would have the rubrics, but the graders or the folks that would evaluate would be the engineers at the companies that were purchasing Whiteboard. And that was our like great hotshot idea at that time, and that's how we were going to build a platform. And when we initially went out to sell and I started talking to companies, they were like, well, we don't have the time to buy a half-baked product and then like have to evaluate it on our end. Like, we want something that just works for us end to end. Like, I don't want to have to think about it more. It was a response that we often got. I remember this very clearly, having like sitting in one of our initial sales calls, and we were about to lose this pilot deal at that point. In the call, I was like, okay, we'll just grade all of them. Like, we'll grade all like 300 candidates that you need to interview for in the next month. We'll do it all. Our head of engineering at that time, who was in the meeting with me, like looked around at me and was like completely bewildered. Like, what did you just accept? What did you just sign up to do? And we walked into the meeting and like we had this like big conversation of like, there's no way we can do this. They're just like, how are we going to evaluate 300 candidates all by ourselves? We ended up doing it and became the de facto model for what Whiteboard is today. Like, very much informed our product roadmap. It informed our go-to-market strategy in many ways of like how we sold the tool. And we realized we got a lot of feedback from customers as well. And we now can update our evaluation methods a lot more quickly because everything runs in-house. So it was a big decision at that point. It was a fork in the road in some ways. We had like long conversations about it. And ultimately, it was a little bit of gut and a little bit of like what our customers wanted, and just taking the difficult road of saying yes to your customer and seeing what works.
This episode is encrypted by CipherStash. Data breaches are becoming a fact of life. Know why? One of the reasons is because developers lack the right tooling to get the job done, i.e. encryption at rest tools are complex and inadequate. The solution? Encryption in use with CipherStash. CipherStash uses searchable encryption in use technology, providing continuous and universal protection for sensitive data. With CipherStash, you can turn your existing database into a vault, utilizing zero-trust key management, SQL native, and with no code. Though encryption is complicated, CipherStash is easy to use. The tool fully supports SQL via a drop-in driver replacement, supporting the query types you know and love today. And did we mention it's fast? For queries over 100 million records, you can expect additional overhead of less than 1 millisecond. It's a no-brainer. Get started by reviewing their docs or downloading sample projects in Rails or Node plus Sequelize today. Visit cypherstash.com/codestory and get started protecting your data. This episode is supported by Treble. This day and age, APIs are a fact of life. And as such, product and engineering teams need tooling that is lightweight, real-time, and data-rich to help them ship and maintain APIs faster. That's where Treble comes in. Treble is an all-in-one platform for the entire API lifecycle. The product offers world-class monitoring and observability, providing more than 40 data points for each request, enabling you to understand everything from performance to user behavior. Dashboards help connecting your entire team for lifecycle collaboration. Documentation is automatically generated, saving massive amounts of time. for your development team with every new release. And setting up Treble? Super easy and fast. In 3 simple steps, you can be up and running with their platform. Their pricing is designed to support API teams of all sizes. So get started with Treble today and automate your API ops. Did I mention they have a free forever plan? Find out more by visiting treble.com/codestory. That's TRBLLE.com/codestory. So you've got your MVP, it's working. How did you progress the product from there and mature it? How did you go about that maturation process? And to wrap that in a box a little bit, what I'm looking for is how did you build your roadmap? And how do you go about deciding, okay, this is the next most important thing to build or to address with Whiteboard?
There was a lot of mistakes that we constantly make as a first-time founder is going through this. But I would say that the way we built our MVP was really, really smart in the sense that customers informed our roadmap. When we initially built out, it was so scrappy. It was held together by app scripts. It was a Google Doc and it was a zip file. And then eventually we started to see that work. We're like, okay, how do we put this on one platform so it's not coming through an email? We built a platform and we plugged the Google Doc into an iframe and put it into the platform. So very, very small iterative changes. Then we found that candidates were like, hey, I don't like timering by myself. We added a timer into the platform. And we heard from customers that we needed more descriptive onboarding materials, and we plugged that into the platform. So very, very much came in response to what we were hearing were needs and keeping an eye for where were we adding the most value. The interview, which was the heart of our product, was working. We were seeing we were adding value. We were saving companies time. We were helping them hire faster. We were helping them identify strong candidates and win them in a really competitive market at that time through a better interviewing process and a shorter time to hire. So all those things were working, and now we were optimizing for parts of the experience that felt a little too scrappy, or might have been buggy, or might have not been able to scale. And now we continue to take a similar approach while still looking a little bit, now having the space to look a little bit more ahead of expecting what customer needs might be in the market and building ahead towards that.
So let's switch to team then. So how did you go about building your team? And what did you look for in those people to indicate that they were the winning horses to join you?
I think with team, it's also very much an iterative process. To me, when we were building our initial team, it was really important that, one, we were looking for engineers. And so it was, do they hold true to the mission and what we're building towards? And if that was true, then we started to look for, especially now, have you worked at an early stage startup before? What are your ways of, have you seen what success looks like, what great looks like? Are questions that I like to look for when building a team. Initially, it was just, can someone hop on for this scrappy mission? I remember making our first hires and being like, you are going to come work on this project? This idea that I came up with? I was just so indebted and so thankful for anyone that would be interested in working on Whiteboard at that point. But it proved that clearly this problem resonated and they saw potential here. And so it was the ability to can we all roll up our sleeves and work together was really important. We've been on this journey with building Whiteboard now for 5 years. And every stage, you're looking for someone a little bit different, for a different set of skills, a different set of background. And some people are able to adapt and grow, or some people like to be in super early stage. So at this point, we start to look for people who've done this before, who've grown a company before, and they can step in and be really, really helpful. So building a team has been a learning point for me, for sure, and is a constant iterative cycle.
This episode is supported by Terso. Terso is the open source edge database from the creators of libSQL, the popular fork of SQLite. If you put your edge computing close to your users, like with Netlify or Vercel edge functions or Cloudflare workers, you should put your data there too, in order to maximize performance gains at the edge. Terso makes it easy. With a developer experience of SQLite and a distributed database you can replicate much closer to your users than traditional database offerings in the cloud. Terso's lightweight, easy to use, and free to get started. The team at Terso is offering a generous starter plan specifically for Code Story listeners. Head over to terso.tech/codestory and get started today. That's TURSO.tech/codestory. Terso, welcome to the Data Edge. This episode was automatically optimized by Cast. If you run cloud-native software on AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, you know how out of hand the bill can get. This uncertainty hurts your business, but you can solve it with Cast AI. Cast AI automates cloud cost, performance, and security management for hundreds of companies of all sizes. The platform's customers begin saving immediately and cut an average of over 60%. So before you go and sign a multi-year contract with a cloud provider or lay people off, check out what Cast AI can do for you. To get you saving even faster, Cast AI is offering a free cloud cost audit with a personal consultation. Visit cast.ai/codestory to get started. Let's switch to scalability. And given your earlier stories, I think I have an impression of where you might go here, but I'm going to ask it openly. Did you build this to scale efficiently from day one, or have you been fighting this as you grow and gain traction in any capacity? That could be technology, it could also be team.
As all our advisors would tell you, we certainly didn't build this to scale efficiently. Now we definitely, we're at the ends of ripping app scripts out of our infrastructure still. It's been with us for a very, very long time. And we probably should have pulled out of it a little bit earlier in terms of tech debt. So I would say there's a little bit of fighting to grow out of that and be able to scale more and more. In retrospect, do I think we shouldn't have used it or we should have built things to scale in the beginning? 100% no. I think we learned a ton from being able to build really quickly. It informed a lot of our roadmap, like I mentioned. It informed a lot of our ability to move quickly. And now our approach is a little different because we are thinking a little bit more from a scale perspective.
So as you step out on the balcony and you look across all that you've built, what are you most proud of?
Two things come to mind. The first is certainly the impact on candidates. We review candidate quotes every Monday, and over the week we receive hundreds of candidate feedback quotes, and it's just so reaffirming and great to hear from candidates when they say this is the first interview they felt assessed them for skills that were actually relevant, that made them feel good about interviewing, that wasn't a waste of their time, or they felt comfortable in actually taking an interview like this compared to any other interview they've taken. It's an interview, but it's also a pathway for them to hopefully land a job that potentially is a dream job or a big job that could meaningfully change their lives. Is a huge, huge impact. And when broken interview systems continue to impede or create blocks for individuals from landing that, and our ability to break that down and replace it with something that's a lot more fair and allows candidates to demonstrate their skills and achieve their dreams in many ways, that feels incredibly, incredibly amazing that we're able to do that and impact so many people. On a more personal note, I will say I had no idea what it felt like to build a startup or to go through this. And the journey for the last 5 years, as I look back, has certainly changed a lot in me. I could not believe in myself that I had the ability to build something out of nothing. If I had not just done it in the last 5 years and seen what it's like to build something, I think I still would not believe I could do it.
Let's flip the script a little bit. Tell me about a mistake you made and how you and your team responded to it.
A couple of years ago, we heard some murmurs or requests for wanting a data science assessment. I talked to our team. I was like, let's go build it. Let's just go launch it. And there was so much pressure to want to launch this new assessment. It was our first time launching a brand new type of assessment. We didn't go through our normal cycles of researching and kind of building it in a way that would be scalable and sustainable. There's a point as you start to grow where you need to be able to balance the scrappy and the scalable. And I've found it to be very difficult to be like, either sometimes you lean to risk averse and you go more scalable route and that takes longer, or you go the super scrappy route and you incur a bunch of tech debt and things end up breaking down the line. So like, how do you really toe the line as you grow as a company, but you're not too big, but you're not too small? So when we started to receive feedback that we needed to make some big changes to it as we were launching it in beta, we realized, because of how quickly we put this together without really taking a look, there were some like pretty deep things we would have to change if we were going to improve the assessment based on the customer feedback we were receiving. And ultimately, we had to pull it out and put that assessment on pause and completely rebuild the infrastructure to support it. And my lesson learned there was, one, should have done a lot more research and figured out how to balance the scrappy and the scaled version. We're launching it again now. It's a lot more polished. It's a lot more better. It responds to a lot more of that customer feedback we were receiving on it. So I'm really, really excited for it to come out very soon. And it's built in a way that allows us to make a lot more improvements and add-ons on top of it too, which both our technical team is happy with, and I think our product team is as well.
So this will be fun to ask. What does the future look like for the product and for your team?
When I look at Whiteboard in the future and the vision we have for Whiteboard, it's very much anyone who is building a company, working at a company, kind of the initial things that you go into building a company. You're like, okay, I'm going to determine if I'm going to build on GCP or AWS. I have to put in my payroll infrastructure. Am I going to use Gusto, or am I going to use JustWorks or something else? You have this like checklist of items. You just go down the list that you're going to buy a laptop. There's a checklist of items that you go down where you need to have to be able to build your company. If you are hiring a team and growing a company and bringing people on, Whiteboard is a tool that you just know you're going to go sign up for, and you're going to need to have, because it's going to provide you your interview loops and the ability to very confidently know, like, hey, this is a role I'm hiring for, and I'll be able to go to Whiteboard and confidently know how to structure all my interviews and what to ask, how to evaluate candidates, so that I feel really strongly that I'm building the best team with the resources that I have. And I very much see Whiteboard as a product becoming the default when it comes to anyone building a company. From a team perspective, I love the team that we have now. The ability to ideate on projects or on ideas and to build, and how we come together. Like, people are here like through the thick and thin. I think we continue to grow from here in terms of team, and bring on similar culture carriers to who we have now that are very, very tied to the mission, and seeing the impact of Whiteboard grow, and seeing it grow in the long term.
Let's switch to you. Who influences the way that you work? Name a person or many persons or something you look up to, and why.
I've built, thankfully, because I think without it, I wouldn't be able to go through this journey, a really strong community of founder friends, particularly founders who are highly empathetic, are kind, and show me and the world that there's a way to be successful and go through this journey without being a jerk, without being cold. Even through kind of the thick and thin, speaking with them and having their support has been incredibly helpful. And those are people that I certainly look up to on how they navigate hard decisions and hard situations. And I learn a lot from them.
So we talked about a mistake earlier, but this is a little different spin. If you could go back to the beginning, what would you do different? Or where would you consider taking a different approach? It doesn't have to be a mistake. Could have worked out, but maybe you'd tweak it a little bit.
I would take a lot more risks. A lot more faster decision making. I spoke to earlier about being a perfectionist, and working on Whiteboard has definitely dulled that a ton, where I'm a lot more able to just like go and get things started and just push it out and try it out. There's certainly many moments that still come to mind where I wish I had taken more risks or been faster at making decisions. to know, not because I thought I could have made the right decision, but faster decision making turns out to be faster learning as well. And that's really what I always hope to be optimizing for.
Okay, so you're getting on a plane and you're sitting next to a young entrepreneur who's built the next big thing. They're jazzed about it. They can't wait to show it off to the world. Can't wait to show it off to you right there on the plane. What advice do you give that person, having gone down this roadbed?
I often joke that Whiteboard will be my one and only startup that I work on. And a lot of my friends who've worked on multiple companies, they're like, yeah, you say that now, but post Whiteboard, whatever that looks like, you'll probably wait a year and be like, okay, I want to do something again because I can do it better. Like I've learned everything I've learned and I'll do it better. The advice I would give someone is to really take care of their mental stamina through this. This is so much of a long game. There's like high highs and low lows I probably go through, not even in the matter of days, but sometimes in the matter of hours while building this. And I think that's certainly true of any founder I've spoken to. So to keep at it and to know that's always going to be the case and not to be deterred by the no's or the lows, because if you believe in your product, the highs are always around the corner. Fantastic advice. Couldn't agree more. Well, Sargun, thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for telling the creation story of Whiteboard. Thanks, Noah. And this concludes another chapter of Code Story. Code Story is hosted and produced by Noah Labhart. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting app of your choice. And when you get a chance, leave us a review. Both things help us out tremendously. And thanks again for listening.
Taxes was feeling so stuck. Sitting in traffic, squeezing into a parking spot, all to squeeze in getting tax help during your lunch break. Now Taxes is a TurboTax expert who does your taxes for you, while you go about your day getting real-time notifications about their progress and the most money back guaranteed. Now this is Taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile apps. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.